Good morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I have one of my very favorite people in the world. His name is Dr. Patrick Porter, and we've known each other for a few years through the American Academy of Anti-Aging. And Dr. Porter is, there's so many things I can say about him, but probably the one that everyone who knows him best by is that he is the CEO and founder of BrainTap. And so he's been in this field for 3 decades, right, Patrick?
Yep, since 1986, so four.
4 decades now.
Yes.
Okay, and Patrick is well. Why don't I let you tell a little bit about you, Patrick, because you can probably say it best. But I'll just say one little tidbit, and that is that probably of all the people in the neuroscience world, if you say that term, people will immediately think of Dr. Patrick Porter.
Hmm.
So, with that in mind and that preamble, why don't you tell us about who you are and your journey to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I'll simplify for the group. My dad was a seminar leader called the Silva Method, and they used something called the Silva sound. So when I was growing up, we actually used isochronic tones. We didn't know that was what it was, but they were using this tone and would sync the brains of everybody in the seminar to alpha, which is a super learning state. So that kind of piqued my interest. When I went to school for electronics. But I kept helping my dad out with the seminars, and it kind of got the bug to do that. So I went back to school and got my PhD in psychology, and I've been doing this ever since. I started with a company called Light and Sound Research. We were the very first people to use light, sound, and vibration to entrain the brain. So when we talk about brain entrainment, uh, everyone is in training their brain right now, whether they know it or not. Their environment's in training it, whether you're like if we're sitting by the ocean, it's going to be 10 hertz frequency. So there's the evoked potential of alpha. If we go to the mountaintops, we're going to have the evoked potential of 7.8 hertz, which happens to be theta. So what this does for our brain health that we're missing today and why it's important is when we used to live and be hunters and gatherers, we'd be outside under the sunlight, we'd be moving around nature, we'd be turning on and off these brain waves because our environment triggers that brainwave activity. These cues actually train our brain. So what we did is we said, well, people are still in homes, they're under bad light, they're doing all these things. Their brain is not getting. What I tell people is your brain was not designed for the life you're living today. I mean, even though everybody thinks that technology's been around a long time, on the scope of the human lifespan, as far as humans on Earth, 200,000 years, it's a very limited time. So our brains don't know what's happening with all these frequencies from EMF to cell phones to computer screens to flickering lights. All of this is influencing our brain activity. So what I've done over the years is my passion has always been how can I help people down regulate their nervous system from fight or flight into more of a parasympathetic state. And once they're in that state, there's two things you need to solve to improve your life in any way possible. If you don't solve these two problems, I don't care what you do, you're never going to have a real solution. One is you got to manage stress. You got to
Mhm.
have a way to. Now, when I say manage stress, you're never going to get rid of stress, but what we need to do is build capacity. Our brain has a lot more capacity than we know of, but we're not utilizing that capacity. So what we do with light, sound, and vibration, we'll get into it, I'm sure, during the call. And there's some other things you can do food wise, movement wise, and breath wise, and these kind of things to keep your brain functioning, to minimize that stress, felt stress. Now, you might have stress around you, but you don't want it to impinge upon your health. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing is sleep. If you're not sleeping well, that's what we fix. That's the number one thing that we fix because you have to learn how to down regulate the nervous system, especially at night when we,
Mhm.
500 channels on television and people can binge watch all night long and they don't get enough sleep. Then that's one of the things. Now we've done studies on a lot of different things we could talk about, like dementia but our sleep studies and our stress studies, those are probably the biggest ones because those two factors contribute to every other illness that's out there.
Mhm. Yeah, and of course, you always include the diet, the lifestyle issues, but
Yes.
those
Mm,
two spokes on the wheel, which you
mm,
just said, are part of that lifestyle. circle that we all need to be aware of. So I'm so happy you brought that up right away, because without managing the lifestyle part of our existence, we're not going to make the progress no matter what we do. You could find a cure for dementia, and you still wouldn't solve all of the problems with the brain if you didn't focus on those lifestyles. So thank you for saying that. I think it would be a really helpful, Patrick. I know we did this in our first interview, but I want to, in case somebody that's watching today didn't see the first one, we'll probably add it to the show notes, the interview we did in April of 2023. However, just in case somebody doesn't want to go back to see that, could you just go through the basic terminology of the different brainwave states and the different parts of the brain that focus on the different things that the brain does? Those two things, I think, would be the ABCs to launch off here today.
Right. Let's start with the brain first, and then we'll talk about brain waves. When we think about stress, the reason that it's important to manage a stress response, there's two reasons. One is the amygdala, which hijacks the frontal lobe. So when you're under stress, we need to be thinking correctly, but the problem is that we just become reactionary. So depending upon your training, your upbringing, your belief system, that all plays in under stress. So what they say is stress, people that can handle stress or manage stress, that in a positive way, they become leaders. The people that can't, they become followers because they don't have executive function. So the frontal lobe is really important because that's the part of the brain that atrophies as we age and blood flow stops. And it's really to do with stress. Now that stress is doing something in the body, and then we're going to get to brain waves. It's actually triggering a response in the liver. And most people don't realize the liver controls 300 functions of the brain. So there's no part of the body that isn't symbiotic. So when you think about one part of the body, you can't just say, I'm going to work on the brain and not the body. The gut brain, they call it, and so there's this gut brain, but I'm just specifically talking about the liver. When you have a stress response, you have 25 grams of sugar called glucagon that gets dumped into the bloodstream. When it gets dumped into the bloodstream, that's like 5 tablespoons of sugar. We can only have 1 tablespoon of sugar at any one time in the bloodstream. And if you're just sitting at your phone or sitting at a stoplight or driving through traffic and you're not really using, your muscles aren't using the sugar because the sugar has to move into the muscles to give you energy. If not, it's going to create an insulin response. Now, insulin is a fat storage hormone. So the reason that we have this weight problem in the world today, and it's a neurological problem because when you have visceral fat, when you have too much fat on your body, it actually acts like a brain. It starts thinking and responding. It starts building cravings into it because it wants to stay alive, just like everything else in the known universe. We're all trying to fight for survival. Well, most people are walking around, unfortunately, with about a year's worth of energy on their system. And if they go back and watch that other video, they're going to see me with 50 pounds heavier because as I'm doing my research, I'm saying, I got to get rid of this visceral fat, especially at a young age of 64. I don't want to be 75 and being overweight because it's going to tax the body. That's stress in the body. So now let's talk about brain waves, because brain waves, every day, these brain waves are operating or they're being suppressed. And in most people, they're being suppressed. We've measured about 30,000 brains over the last 10 years here at BrainTap at our lab. We have a lab, 6,000 square foot lab with all the bells and whistles. It's a pretty cool place. You should come out here, Michele, sometime. We'll treat you to a day at the spa.
I would love that.
We'll do everything. We'll measure your brain. We'll look at your blood under a microscope. All of those things. We'll measure your frontal lobe. We'll measure a fat metabolism at the cellular level. We have all these tools now. And the nice thing is, back in the 80s, we didn't have these things. We only had biofeedback. So we used what they call GSR machines, or galvanic skin response systems, where we would measure skin temperature, respiration, heartbeat, and then we would know there was a correlation between those and brain waves. And the whole thing we were trying to do was get people out of pain. So keep that in mind in what we're doing. So we'll talk about beta. Beta is the brainwave that's primarily should be your predominant brainwave when you're awake. It's also can be your kind of like your kryptonite, if you will, because All fear, frustration, and anxiety, all negative emotions occupy the beta brainwave. And and part of it is when you have lack of breathing or you have shallow breathing, you actually trigger beta brainwave activity because that's a fear response. You're actually mimicking, your physiology is mimicking fear and anxiety and frustration, and then that magnifies into the beta brainwave. Now, when we relax, we start doing belly breathing, deep breathing exercises. We shift gears into a brainwave called alpha. Alpha is your creative brain, and we call it the intuitive mind. What really should be happening is 45% of now think of your brain waves as 100%. You only have 100%. So that 100% has to be spread out among these 6 brain waves I'm going to talk about. So when there's beta should be 45, alpha should be 30. Now between that 30 and 45, there's a band that's called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is the band that actually gets suppressed as we age. It has to do with cognitive function, recall and memories, speech, balance, all the things that happen to us as we age. So when you think about being ageless and timeless, that's the brainwave you want to train first thing in the morning. The worst thing people do is they have a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. This crushes something called the cortisol trough. So most people, their cortisol level stays constant. It shouldn't stay constant. You should have high cortisol in the morning, high norepinephrine, dopamine, cortisol, all these. This wakes you up. We call it digital coffee when you use BrainTap to do it. Then it should wean until about 2 o'clock when it drops. Now at 2 o'clock, this is why I say our brain is not designed for the life we're living today, because our brain was designed for the Serengeti. And what happens at 2 o'clock in the Serengeti? The lions are sleeping, the zebras are sleeping. Nobody's running around trying to beat anybody up. Nobody's trying to get a victory here. They're just relaxing. It's too darn hot. So our genetic memory that we're experiencing, which, by the way, if I could take your DNA, Michele, and staple it to the floor where you're sitting, it would reach to Pluto.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Qigenics. From stem cell therapy to lifestyle coaching, Qigenics is the perfect place to go for all your health and wellness needs. This health clinic is amazing at getting you personalized medicine and wellness that is unique to you. Use the code AGELESS and you'll get 20% off your first service with them. Go to www.qigenix.com to find out more information about these powerful methods.
That plays a part in these brain waves because that viscous material, it's crystalline viscous material that's inside you right now, is pulling in codes. We call them the circadian rhythm, but actually they now know, our scientists at MIT said, we're pulling in codes from the center of the universe. And they're broadcasting those codes into our body as information that rebraids our DNA every 40 seconds. So listeners, you're not the same person that started this conversation. You are different. And your cells are changing at 50 million cells per second are changing. They're dying and they're being born. You've died 1,000 times before you got on this podcast. You're a different person. Your body is different. So when you think of ageless and timeless, your body is meant to evolve every minute. We have a new expression, our DNA expression, our cellular metabolism, all of these things. Now, if the brainwaves are out of balance, then what happens is we're sending the wrong signals to the body because these brainwaves also control neurotransmitter activity. For those that don't understand neurotransmitters, think of you have a thought, and so your little electrical activity comes out of the cell or the neuron and says, I had this idea, this epiphany. If it can connect with something, now it has to have a neurotransmitter. That means that neuron is being transmitted to another neuron.
Right.
And then what happens is they recruit. And so when I always tell people it's like cicadas, in the summer when you hear one start, then the other start, that's how the brain works. So when we do meditation, relaxation, breathing techniques, and we start recruiting more alpha activity because we're doing deep breathing activity, the brain actually begins to build up energy. And what I want the listeners to know is this energy, we have to put probes on the brain to measure the brain, but we can also measure the voltage of the brain. When we were born, we were the smartest we're ever going to be. We were a 100 billion neurobit processor, fully wired, and we were running at 18.1 volts. Most people out there are below 10 volts. If you drop below 7, you're going to have dementia. if you drop below 4, you're going to have Alzheimer's. We showed in our dementia study, as soon as we got their voltage over 7, they stopped having dementia symptoms
And
because it's an
is that
energy, it's
something,
an,
sorry to interrupt, but is that
yeah,
something that you can measure in your
yeah.
lab?
Yes. You
Okay,
measure it with you can measure it with a lot of different EEG devices. We measure it with one called the Wavi.
oh, I know the Wabi. I took
Yeah.
that test.
Yeah. So
Oh,
the Wavi will tell
I
you
better
your
go
brain
check
voltage.
that test, right? I
Yeah.
think I was in the top 80 percentile for over 50, for my age group.
Yeah.
So that's I don't know. I didn't
Yeah, so
really.
you're probably 11 because most people are at 10.1. But I had a golfer in here the other day. There was an 11, and he was actually having Parkinson's expression. But
Yeah,
it's like I told him, I said, you have the energy to heal this
yeah,
because most people don't have that energy in their brain.
yeah,
So if you drop out of alpha, you're going to drop into something called theta.
yes,
Now, remember I said all of these brain waves trigger neurotransmitter activity. So
right.
theta is really important, and most adults do not have enough theta. And what it triggers is GABA.
Mm-hmm,
GABA is an inhibitor. It
mm-hmm,
actually helps you to relax, helps you to sleep. If
mm-hmm,
you don't have enough theta, and GABA is also a precursor to DMT.
mm-hmm,
So we are predisposed to have these out of body experiences, these kind of spiritual experiences, or get outside of our stress. That's why we dance and we move and we do all these things.
mm-hmm.
So, but if we don't have theta, it's hard to sleep because the sleep cycle is a cycle. It's not digital. You don't go from beta to delta. If you do, you have bad sleep. If you have
Yeah,
a sleeping score out there, you'll see it. They call it latency. And that means that you didn't take enough time to wind down. You should take 15 minutes. And we'll talk about that a little later in the show about the sleep practices that really work. Besides using BrainTap, of course, you can use that, but there's other ways you can do it as well. So when you're down regulating, you get into a state called delta. Now, delta is when you recover and replenish. This is the only time your brain detoxes. So imagine, Michele, it's 2014. You're in physiology class and they show you a picture of the lymphatic system. It's going to stop right here at the neck.
mm-hmm,
But in 2015, a doctor during a sleep study recognized a part of the brain, a system of the body that we didn't even know about before called the glial lymphatic system.
mm-hmm,
Only triggers during level 4 sleep, which is deep. We call it deep delta sleep. So
mm-hmm.
the key is to get an hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep, and you'll crush any metric about sleep. It doesn't matter how much time you're in bed. We can talk about that too a little bit later. So there's
Okay,
only one more brainwave I want to talk about.
okay,
It's called gamma. And this is important because now, if you'd told me 20 years ago about gamma, I would have said gamma, schizophrenia, blah, blah, blah. Nobody knew about gamma because we didn't have really a way to measure it. Now we realize gamma is super important for the brain, especially for the aging brain, because gamma is like the bass drum that keeps the whole band together. And we should have between 2 and 5% of our brainwave activity in gamma. So think of it like you're at a drum circle and there's a master drummer, boom, boom, boom. It keeps the rest of the frequencies in harmony. And
mm,
what we find as people age, unfortunately, is they lose that gamma frequency. And then the brain dysregulates. And if when I was talking about voltage,
mm-hmm,
we actually in the lab will find people that will have, let's say they have 11 volts in one hemisphere and 9 volts in the other. They're still going to have dementia
mm-hmm.
because that mismatch means the brain is not communicating. And it's like two Wi-Fi networks that aren't on the same wavelength. That voltage makes a difference. So that's kind of a background of the brain and brain waves for you.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions. So let's go to, well, obviously everybody talks about the gut brain axis, but
Mhm.
there is also the heart, gut, and brain
Yes.
axis. So would you integrate those three? And of course, let everybody know about the serotonin that is 90% in our gut. So if you
Yes.
can,
All those neurotransmitters I'm talking about are not made in the brain. Less than
exactly,
5% is made in the brain. They're all made in the gut.
right.
So the gut should be the first brain. I should say that right off the bat.
Okay, that's
Because
good.
if you have a severed spine, you're still operating.
Yeah,
Think of this brain as like a Google tablet.
yeah,
It only transmits and receives information. It gets us in
yeah,
trouble.
yeah,
But the brain that's the most important actually is your heart. You have
Yeah.
40,000 neutrino cells, and it acts as a unified field, a heart, that actually can be measured up to 18 feet away. It's a
Yeah.
magnetic
Right.
frequency. Like this is electrical, this is magnetic. The
Right.
gut, the gut is actually electrical too. That's why when if you really listen to your gut, the gut is doing its job. Think of it as your subconscious.
Yeah.
It's doing everything you don't have time to do. It's digesting your food. It's metabolizing whatever you put into your body. It's like a nuclear furnace. It's changing out the cells. It's making sure the blood vessels stay good. It's making sure your pH is perfect in your blood, because if it isn't, you're dead. All of these things happen, but that's all being controlled by the gut. It's not being controlled by the brain. If we had to
Right.
think about those things, we would
Right.
forget. There's too much going on, and we have to
Right.
go to sleep. So while we're sleeping, who's watching the store? It's the gut. And now the heart, if there's a reason that there's more heart attacks on Monday morning than any other day of the week, because if your heart's not in it,
Mm-hmm.
your heart will just simply stop. So,
Mm-hmm.
and your heart actually transmits twice as much information to the body as the body does to the heart.
Mm.
So when you think about it, it's more
Oh,
than the
wait,
brain does.
Patrick, say that again. That was really important. Say that
The,
again.
the heart transmits twice as much information to the body as the body does to the heart. So
Wow.
think of the heart as the conductor.
Yes.
That conducts the. So let's say if your heart's into something and you have energy and passion, you do
Yeah.
a better job. And I
Yes.
tell people there's two things that trigger epigenetics, and this is super important for the ageless and timeless community.
Yes.
Because if you look at life as a challenge, you
Yes.
actually upregulate your DNA. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at life as a threat, you downregulate.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
if you're a negative person, literally you're handicapping yourself.
Yep.
So that's the first thing that needs to change for really brain health and brain fitness, is to become a more optimistic, positive person,
I love
regardless of
that.
what's happening. So what I tell people is, look at your greatest fault. Like in my first book that I wrote, Awaken the Genius, I have a chapter, I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't serve me to say, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic. I got
Mm-hmm.
abused as a child, and everybody should. So I tell people, think of your biggest liability.
That's,
Imagine
that's
for a moment you're Superman. I'm
yeah.
going to go drink of water here.
That's okay. So while you do drinking your water, so it's the same thing as the Chinese saying crisis and opportunity are synonyms. So use your crises or your challenges for opportunities to grow and learn, and that's what basically I think what you're
Oh,
saying.
exactly. But the metaphor that I have now for people is, imagine Superman runs around with kryptonite and starts telling everybody that kryptonite hurts him.
Yeah.
This is what people do with all their problems.
Right.
My dad was an alcoholic. Here it is. This
Right.
is my wound. No, Superman doesn't tell anybody about kryptonite. He puts
Right.
it in a lead box and puts it in the backyard. You
Right.
don't want to tell anybody. Nobody should know about your problems,
Right.
because the more
Right.
you bring them up in neurophysiology, if I bring up a problem, they call it in psychology revivification. So we're bringing it back to life, because
Yeah.
our nervous system doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So we're back in the abuse
Yeah.
every time we tell that story. So
Yeah.
one of the best things you can do for brain fitness is stop telling your story. Start telling your victory story. Figure out,
Yes.
what is your victory story? How
I
are you?
love I love what you're saying, Patrick. I always used to tell my oldest sister, who was a pessimist, I always used to say, count your blessings, not your troubles. And that, I mean, I think that encapsulates what you're
Exactly.
saying. Basically, is look for all the opportunities to grow and to use your experiences, whatever they may be, problems, challenges, as triggers, as the momentum for your growth.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and
Yeah.
don't tell anybody. I see it all the time on the internet. Do
Right.
not tell anyone about your problems.
Right. I mean, my nickname is Dr. Positive, right?
Yeah.
So I had a business partner tell me one time, he says, Porter, you're too damn positive. And I
Oh,
said, I'd rather be positive and disappointed every once in a while than wake up disappointed all day long and miss out on the positive stuff
there
that's
you
happening.
go. So,
So,
and talk about the vagus nerve and how that integrates the three
sure.
organs that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the vagus nerve is the one that turns on the parasympathetic system
Yeah.
and actually gets you into healing, digest. It's called the wandering nerve because it basically moves throughout the whole body, but it connects these three brains. And you can trigger that through vibration, like we do with BrainTap. we have frequencies that come in through the ears, and those lights are pulsating. So that they're in the inner ear canal, we can trigger the vagus nerve. Now, there's also vagus nerve stimulators that you can get that are very powerful, but we use that one because we want to turn on that vagus nerve. We want to turn on that parasympathetic because when you're stressed out, by the way, your vagus nerve gets suppressed.
Yeah. That's
So
exactly what I was thinking, that the vagus nerve is like the motor, the engine of your car, right? If
yeah,
or if you don't give it gas, you're not, it's not going to run.
this is why in brain fitness we say there's 3 different times of the day and 3 different breaths. Now there's 100 different breath techniques, but I like to break it down into really simple ones, and they all trigger the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is what they call psychological breathing, where you breathe in, you let it out with a sigh. And you do this in your bedroom because your family might think you're crazy. But it'd be good to teach your whole family this. What it does is it will regulate the nervous system. It will create that norepinephrine, dopamine, and cortisol that you need because you used to be drinking coffee first thing in the morning. It will get you fired up and it will reset your metabolism. But the main thing it does is it triggers the vagus nerve to wake up,
Yeah.
to start working. And then in the afternoon, when everybody has a biological low at 2 o'clock. Your
Yeah.
temperature drops 2 degrees. So what we tell people is at that time, do the box breath. You breathe into the count of 4, you hold to the count of 4, you breathe out to the count of 4, you hold it out to the count of 4. Now you can even do longer if you want, but that's going to trigger also the vagus nerve. It's going to reset the parasympathetic system. It's going to rebalance the nervous system. It's going to calm you down, and it's going to help you to focus. And I always tell people if the Navy SEALs do it, and they're pretty stressed out because they have to, imagine 5 people having to take on a battleship.
Right.
You're going to have some stress there, but they teach them to do this breath so they can manage their emotions.
Right.
And energy and emotion. And then at night, to trigger your vagus nerve for deep and profound relaxation so you can have that great night's sleep, you want to do what we call the 4-8 breath. And you breathe into the count of 4. And when you're breathing in, you think about your day. And if there's good things that happen, I always tell people, imagine them in color and enjoy them, step into them, really appreciate them with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
If anything negative happened, reframe it. What I mean by that is put it into a picture frame, put it in your subconscious, let your subconscious figure out what was the lesson? What were you to learn? Because if you don't learn from that experience, it's going to keep repeating itself.
Right.
But you don't have to do it at the conscious level. You have a 100 billion neural processor, and there's more neurological activity that happens during sleep than when you're awake. So give your brain the work. And then when you breathe out very slowly to the count of 8. And you basically do a body scan. You start at the top of the head as you breathe out, and the slower you can breathe, the better, and just unwind the body. And what will happen is usually after about 2 or 3 minutes of that, you're in deep sleep and your body is unwound because your body holds a charge and you have to discharge that stress or you're not going to sleep. And I know people say, I don't need that. I just fall asleep right away. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If we looked at their latency, you've got to release the stress from the body. Mm-hmm. Once you release that stress, now you're in homeostasis. Now the nervous system can re-regulate. And when you're doing the deep sleep, you're detoxifying the brain. But when you're doing REM, that's when you're compartmentalizing and organizing all of the activities of your past, organizing them into the future, and getting you ready for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Basically giving you the superpowers you need to achieve your results for the next day, giving you those peak performance moments you want.
So the sympathetic is the fight or flight. So at 2 o'clock, the sympathetic has rears its ugly head. What if you've been intermittent fasting until 1 o'clock and then you eat right before that 2 o'clock sympathetic takes over? Is autophagy going to have any effect?
No, it's actually every time you eat, you lower your heart rate variability.
Oh.
So you get the gain after about 3 to 4 hours.
Oh.
But if you have an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, just look next time you eat, check it before you eat, check it after you eat. You're going to find that you lost energy.
Okay.
So you can't avoid it. It's basically, think of the sun like the mitochondria. And what they know about our mitochondria is it absorbs and transmits light. That's what it does. So when we introduce light like we do with BrainTap, we're actually feeding the mitochondria light, and it's actually spitting out 32 times more ATP. It doesn't come in the food you consume.
Well, then let me change the question. What if you just were intermittent fasting through a 2 o'clock time frame? So now you're in complete autophagy because you've been fasting for, let's say, 20 hours because
Yeah,
you
you
started
might not
as,
be you might not feel it at that point.
okay,
When we were younger, we didn't feel it.
yes,
When the nervous system was, on fire and was 100% active, we didn't notice that. I mean, no kid I know of really wanted to lay down at 2 o'clock and take a nap. They,
right,
they wanted to, we took the naps earlier, like at 12 o'clock, and we'd wake up around 2 o'clock. But that
right,
doesn't mean our body's temperature didn't drop, but we don't notice it. If we're like you said, if we're on top of our game and our energy's up, we're energy beings. I
yeah,
like to tell people we're light beings.
yeah,
When
exactly,
they say the electron transport chain,
yes.
right? That means that we're electron transport. Everything we do is about moving electrons through the transport chain, which is the human body. And if
Yeah,
it's,
and so when when I was hosting Kashif Khan from the DNA
yes,
company, you know him,
yeah,
and he said, Michelle, you and I have the exact same genetics on neurotransmitters. We're the kind of people, we're entrepreneurs, and we get the dopamine hit, but then we're immediately asking what's next. So in other words, we have low conversion rate of dopamine to the feel good
mhm,
hormone, or neurotransmitter, I mean,
yes.
to our lives. So he said,
Right.
there's the epigenetic part. So how do you? I'm just giving you that as one
Well, yeah. Well,
example
one
because
thing, what I like to tell people is we have to condition ourselves that there is no there. There's no
ah
graduation.
uh-huh.
Every day is new and different. Remember, when I live on a river, so I look outside, I'm looking at the Neuse River. It looks the same as it did yesterday, but that's not the same river.
Yes,
That's new water. The fish
yes,
in there are different fish. The
yes,
sediment is different. The same, remember, your body is changing. So
right.
we have to always look at there is no it's I tell people it's kind of like playing golf. If people play golf, they know that no matter how good you did, there was always a hole you could have done better. So
Right,
if you look at we that's why we have to every night start building our success reel.
right.
And be grateful for what we have. And I love the saying you had with your sister. That's something everybody should use. Count
Yes.
your blessings, not your
Not your troubles.
problems. Yeah.
Yeah, not your problem. But going back to this genetic thing, because people think that their genetic testing is a prison sentence if they get some bad genetics, but your epigenetics is really where it's at. And I think with BrainTap, you prove that epigenetics using BrainTap is the key to unlocking some of those genetic predispositions. So that's why I mentioned the dopamine because of the issue that, like, if I look just at my genetic test, I could say, oh my gosh, I don't have the feel good hormone. How can I be such a positive person? But yet I am. And
Right.
so is Kashif, or he wasn't
Yeah.
always, but he certainly is today because he's known how to train himself.
Yes.
So that's really what I think what you just said, that there's no there. I mean, a pond and a river are completely two different bodies of water, and that we're
Mhm.
like more like the river. Nothing
Right.
is the same.
Right. So I think when people they need to understand that they're different every day. And if you happiness, when I have a session actually called biohacking happiness, because
Yeah.
people don't understand you create your happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't happen because it just shows up.
Right.
People that are positive thinkers believe that life happens through them.
Right.
Negative thinkers think life happens to them.
Yes.
So imagine you're threatening your cells go into cell danger response. At
Yes.
the resistance, we can measure it as resistance in the body. So
Right.
the more resistant you are to being healthy, the less
Right.
healthy you are. It's
Well,
counterintuitive.
I think the first you meant to say that the first one is that life happens for them in the
Yes,
positive people, and you said
yes,
to them, but you meant to say for them, and then
yes,
the negative people, life happens to them, so they're victims.
yes,
They
exactly.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah, they don't see the positive lessons in everything that happens to you. No matter what happens to you, you always want to ask that question: what did I learn from this situation, and how can I do it better or not make the same mistake again if that was a personal challenge that you could have done differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes things happen by fate, and you just have to, there again, like you just said, look for the positive reasoning, and even in fatalistic things that occur.
Hmm.
Like you and I didn't cause the downturn in 2008.
Right.
We as citizens of the world were
Right.
victimized by some decision making that others caused. So we can't blame ourselves, but we can look at that and say, okay, well, we know what happened to us as a result of it. In my world, in real estate, it was devastating. But
Right.
I didn't sit there and cry victim over that. I had to figure out solutions. So I think what you're saying is obviously BrainTap is attacking or addressing all of these things that can be human conditions that can be negative.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
with that segue, let's dive into BrainTap. So why don't you tell us more about how BrainTap addresses all of these issues that we're talking about right now, and how you've shown through your scientific research and your different studies the transformation that BrainTap can accomplish.
The biggest thing is that we can adjust the physiology. So your environment is everything. So how do you interact with your environment? And this is something that happens on the subconscious level. It's not a conscious thing. So we need to bring energy to the brain. That's where light, sound, and vibration comes in. So I'll first, when you think about music, when you've been in an event where you had your favorite music playing, your toes starts tapping, you start, feeling, good about it, and you get energy, right? Even if you didn't want to go there at first, but if they start playing your music, you start feeling good because that music actually activates you. And that's important so that people understand that if you can set your musical tone. So what we do with BrainTap is we use very specific music that engages the nervous system to have more energy. And then on top of that, we use isochronic tones, binaural beats, right frequencies, solfeggio, all these different frequencies. They're all doing something that is helping the brain to recruit more energy because it's always about energy. If we
Okay.
have energy, we can handle it. Energy in the brain is kind of like money in business. When somebody says money can take care of a lot of problems in business, well, energy can take care of a lot of problems in the brain because if the brain has energy, which means it has ATP, that's the currency for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that and we have to trick the brain. So of our 3,000 sessions, every one is a different algorithm that the brain has to follow. And we're using cues in nature. So this isn't something unnatural. It's something we do every day. So we just don't know we're doing it. So what we've
Mm-hmm.
done is we use these cues of light, sound, and vibration, and then we also use words. And Bruce Lipton, who's one of my friends, and when we bring him out to Quantum University all the time to
Mm-hmm.
speak, he's a legend in our field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what he says is words change up to 3,200 gene expressions. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that BrainTap is going to do is it's going to start changing your internal dialogue. What are
Mm-hmm.
you saying to yourself? It's been said that if we talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves, we'd have no friends. Because most
That's
people talk to themselves in such a negative way, and they
right.
think it's positive, but it isn't. So, all these things are all important that we talk about and we let people know so that they understand that there's literally something you can do about it. And it's something easy people can do. You can either just use the app because the app is when we did our study in Australia with coal miners, what we found out was that when they used the app alone, it just took twice as much time. It took 6 weeks to get their sleep up to 70%. And the average coal miner was in bed 10 hours a night, but their sleep scores were negative because they only had 1 minute of deep sleep and 2 minutes of REM at max.
and and
So
and no and no light. They didn't get
no
the
light. They went to work in the dark, sleep in the dark, all those
right.
things. It's a terrible job, really.
Yes. Okay, so what about the light part of
Yeah, what we're doing with the
BrainTap?
light is the same. When somebody said, when I was thinking back with light and sound research, we were trying to figure out how could we engage more of the brain? Because when you meditate, most people don't realize this, you shut down about 30% of your brain's function. And that's because your brain thinks you're going to sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the rods and cones and everything we need for visual processing. Now we're not recruiting the visual processing circuits, but what happens is when you have a flash of light, because of our primitive brain, it's going to wake up. So if I flash a light in the right eye, the left brain will wake up. If I flash in the left eye, the right brain's going to light up. And if I do this together, pretty soon what's going to happen is the brain's not going to shut down anymore. It's going to stay active.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we find happens with BrainTap is that when we train the brain, and it takes about 3 to 6 minutes, depending upon the person, and they can just go online and look at synchronizing metronomes on YouTube, and you see a guy who sets up 200 metronomes, and then he synchronizes them. And as he synchronizes, it takes about 3 minutes. They all synchronize. Our brain, we found, takes anywhere between 3 to actually 7 minutes, depending upon the person. But once it gets synchronized, it creates a Gaussian field. It creates more energy. It becomes self-energized, kind of like they want to build these ever-energizing batteries, or something where
Right.
where it self-generates. Our brain does that, but it
Right.
has to be in synchronicity. And so this synchronicity happens when the brain is in the same coherence. And what's interesting is MIT actually says now that our thoughts extend 10,000 miles from us into a field. This is our science saying this. It's almost like metaphysics. Neuroscience is becoming more and more like metaphysics because it's saying, hey, this light, this electrical activity is actually going out from us and influencing behaviors of people. So this is happening. So when you think about BrainTap, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's calm the body down. And we have 3,000 different sessions. So depending upon what you want to work on, whether it's, you can work on stopping smoking, you can work on improving your sports, you can work on weight loss, you can work on stress reduction. We have mind over menopause for people, whatever. We have so many different sessions and we work with so many different professionals. There's 67 people on the app that are experts at what they do. Of course, a lot of them are mine because I've been doing this the longest, but we have a lot of sessions and they can do it. What I'm going to encourage everyone listening here is don't take my word for it. Download the app. We're going to have it in the show notes. You get 14 days free. Experiment on yourself. And if you have a way to measure your sleep, when people download that app, what we report back is 90% of the people will have their best night's sleep within 3 nights.
Oh, wow.
So with 2/3 of the world not sleeping, that's a good test for you. And we're going to give you the book. I'll show you we're going to give you this book, not as the hard copy, but we're going to give you the digital version of Thrive and Overdrive. So when you download that app, from the show, you're going to get a link that says download this book. So I wasn't able to cover everything I was talking about, but we live in a world, and I have a new book out. Of course, you can buy that online called The Brain Fitness Blueprint, which is, I have that here too. So that's this book, and it's available from Hay House. This one has all my latest information. Thrive and Overdrive is a good one to start with, but if you want to know, this basically has a 30-day plan to fix your brain. And it's very simple. And it doesn't mean you have to have the BrainTap. We give you sessions in that book that will help you to get it fit. But the main thing is once you start to realize that you have the power to upregulate your brain function, to have better focus, better concentration, better memory, perform better, sleep better, all these things, once you realize that, you'll not stop doing it. But it takes recovery time. So it's not really something you do as a physical labor. It's more of a thing you do like a passive, like breath work, eating correctly, moving. Movement is so important. Movement is life in the body. If you don't move, they actually say like sitting for too long, 20 minutes is equivalent to smoking a cigarette on the health scale. Cigarettes are now the benchmark for bad health. So everything, like they say, when you don't have communication, when you don't have a social group, actually they say it's like smoking cigarettes. Your body, we need that social connection. We need to communicate and do those things.
Well, that's one of the 5 pillars.
Yes.
In the blue zones, right? Is the community connection. So I have a question for you, Patrick. I want to talk about your book in just a moment, but why is it that when we go to a doctor's office, they test our heart, they test our liver, they test our kidneys, and so on, okay? But they do not really address the brain. And yet the brain is one of the most, as well as we've already.
Yeah, everyone should have a brain map and see where their brainwave activity is. I think the reason is that there's no money in it. You know, our health system is not a health system. It's a sick care system.
The sick care,
So they have
yes.
to go to if you went to a functional neurologist, they're going to test those things because they
Mhm.
understand the nervous system, and 70% of the nervous system is in the brain.
Okay,
So
but most people aren't going to go to a functional neurologist unless there's something wrong. So they wait until the crisis, and then
yeah,
they try to fix the, in a crisis situation, you're trying to fix a situation like with dementia, Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's as examples.
that's
So
why that's
what
why
do
we're
you
changing the story. You don't have to wait for a breakdown to have a breakthrough.
there?
If you start now, so if you're out there listening to me and you take out your peanut butter, if you
Yeah.
can't smell peanut butter, you're 5 years away from Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
So or dementia, depending upon how severe it is. And there's different things you can do like that. And these, what they know is the sooner you start working on your brain function, the less likely it is you're going to lose it. Because it's
Exactly.
just like muscles. If you start working out when you don't have any muscles, you can't really
Yeah.
work. You need to build the muscles up so you can work out. The same is
Yes.
true with recruiting neurological activity in the brain. So
Right.
start today, and then you won't have to worry about tomorrow.
Well, Dale Bredesen has been on my podcast, and Dr. Bredesen, of course, is
Yes,
the Ending Alzheimer's author, and
yes,
he says exactly what you say. You should start in your 20s because actually you can tell 40 years in advance whether you're going to have any kind of dementia or brain issues, and why not, be proactive. But
right,
nobody that I mean, I don't think anybody. I'm just maybe conjecturing here, but who goes and has a brain scan in their 20s?
right,
So I mean, I didn't, and you didn't. We didn't
right,
know.
right.
So, so what do you think of MRIs as a tool to understand all the things we're talking about?
Well, I think it's great. It's just too expensive here in America usually for people to just do it on their own. But in India, we're doing an MRI study. It's only $10 a scan there.
Oh,
So when I went there to Nimitz Hospital, which is the world's largest psychological hospital, where they proved we beat out all neurofeedback. BrainTap did. So when people say they want to, neurofeedback stresses the brain out. What we showed is if you do the neurofeedback, we did this with MRI. We showed that it stresses the brain. So they need the recovery of BrainTap. What they could do in 40 sessions if they added BrainTap would take 15 sessions. And then
wow.
Dr. Jamanja, she decided let's see what happens if we just do BrainTap. In 15 sessions, they got the same result without using neurofeedback because we
Right.
don't learn the way neurofeedback's cool and I love it. I mean, we have it here at the office, but it's basically to show people you can control your brain waves, but
Mhm.
to recruit those brain waves and do brain fitness, you need to do something that allows them to happen unconsciously, not consciously. Our brain doesn't learn consciously.
Mhm.
It's a very bad way to learn.
So didn't you tell us, I think in the last episode, that only 5% of our brain is conscious?
Yes. Yeah.
That
Your
that's
subconscious is
pretty.
running the whole show. And I would say it's even more than that. Because think about it, all the trillions of activities that's happening right now as we're sitting here and I'm standing here,
Yeah.
our brain is taking care of them all. And I'm not just talking about the brain between our ears. I'm talking about the gut brain, the heart brain. When
Yeah.
I say brain, I'm talking about this is a synergy of all three brains. And if they're
Right.
coherent, which is where heart rate variability comes in, when you have that communication, then it kind of works at a higher level. We can handle better stress. We can handle, you know, controversy. We can overcome things because we're looking at life as a challenge instead of a threat. You
Right.
know, and then like we said, let life happen through you, not to you.
I think.
So
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but I think if there's anything that comes out of our podcast today, it's what you just said. It's all about positive mental attitude, PMA, and allowing yourself to get to that state where life is proactive and not reactive. It's not what happens to you, but how you deal with it,
right.
or
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
what you think.
one negative thing could be positive to one person and negative to another. It's how
Right,
you frame it.
right. All right. Before our time is up, tell us about your book and what inspired you to write it, and what's in it, and why people should buy it.
Well, I think it sums up everything I've done, and my co-author Sakri was head of Google Wellness,
Yes.
and They actually got rid of all their wellness facilitators, which is weird, after COVID, which is kind of bizarre. But they did a lot of research. They had a program called Search Inside Yourself, and they had a lot of research. And I have a lot of research in the public. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to put together, how can we put together a book that can train the layman to use neuroscience in their daily life? So I not only tell the stories about people that have succeeded and give you great actionable steps in every chapter, but it's got that 30-day plan. Once you're done with the book, it says, here's, now that you've read it, now let's take that knowledge and make it actionable. And I think if people take action on that book, we're going to see some magic happen out there, because the brain can heal at any age. And that's the story I wanted to tell, and that our brain is not designed for this lifestyle. So I go through it and just explain why our brain is not designed for the life we're living today. So we have to change the life we're living so that the brain operates in a better place.
Well, then what you talk a lot about creative visualization, and so tell us about that and how that
Yeah.
impacts and
Well,
how.
what happens when you have creative visual? What happens? I tell people, the smarter you are, sometimes it's really the dumber you are, because you limit your possibilities, because it's a factor of quantum physics. If you think you have the problem solved, no other solution will be given to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go in, that's where creative visualization comes in. You just say, hey, I just want the field to open up.
Mm-hmm.
What are 3 or 4 options for me?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to think of the craziest to the most bizarre, because the brain then will give you something in between there. I mean, you have this 100 billion neurobit processor, but we can't do, on a conscious level, we can't do enough. But in the unconscious, where we're relaxed and comfortable and we start visualizing, our neurons, like I said, our nervous system doesn't know the difference between real or imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start to visualize our life, I tell people, what if you went to a movie and the actors didn't rehearse?
Mm-hmm.
A crazy movie.
Mm-hmm.
But people do this in their daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be using creative visualization every day. Like if I'm going to do this podcast, I did a session before this to think about, hey, if you're going to ask me questions, how am I going to respond? I want to be uplifting, and I want to make sure the audience gets the message. I'm going to visualize that outcome that I want, and then the subconscious will bring me that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think I know, and then you don't even ask me any of the questions I think I know, then I'm going to act confused and befuddled, you know. So that's why creative visualization, especially in sports, is as well as life, because we have to visualize the outcome we want, not how we're going to get there. Let the brain figure that out.
It was like 30 years ago or 40 years ago that Galway wrote the inner game of tennis, yes. And then it was the inner game of golf, and then all.
Yes.
But you know, the whole point is to manifest or to visualize what the outcome has already happened, right?
Yes.
And you visualize that all of that, and it becomes part of your consciousness, right? Like get into that, out of that 5%. I mean, into the 5% to be conscious about it, right? So then you manifest. Yeah. No. Well, I can tell you that you've been every bit. It worked for you, because you've been every bit dynamic and really helpful, because a lot of people, you know, just do not understand how they can take control of their lives. Right. You know, what are some of the really concrete steps that we can take that will improve our health? Just using health as the measurement, because that's what we're all about. Yeah. So what you've just done today is given us a transcript, really, a roadmap of how we can do that. And but it does take effort. Yeah. There's nothing that happens to us in life that isn't without some kind of effort, right, Patrick? Mm-hmm. So right. So in your book, I know you said that we can get your other book online. Mm-hmm. So can you just tell us for a moment before we have to leave again how that people can get your book, and also the 14-day trial?
Yeah, there's going to be a link below. It'll be BrainTap something, and then they click on that link. You just put in your credit card. If you don't like it, you won't be charged to the 15th day. Okay. So if you don't like it, just cancel it. We have 50% of the people that will do that will buy the program. Right. So give it a chance. And what I always say is, look at when you do that, look and see about your sleep, because 90% of the people that do download and use it for the first 3 days and report back to us, they're saying they had their best night's sleep. And
Yeah.
we did a study actually in Vegas once at A4M where we took everybody who came to the booth that had, insomnia problems, and we said, hey, we want you to monitor your sleep over the weekend. And they came back, and 90% of them also said they had, and this was in hotel rooms.
Mm.
So, of course, you can, if you like it, then it is $29.95 a month. But
Hmm.
if you don't, you just cancel it. But you have to keep the book either way. The
And then
book is a downloaded PDF.
if you want to get the the rest of the equipment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what they'll do is once they do the download for the free thing, you will see that there will be a headset, and there'll be a special offer for that.
Okay.
Um, and that'll be available to them when they do the download. But I always like people who haven't been to an office. We have 3,000 clinics out there, but if you haven't been to an office, it's always good to start with the audio just to see how you respond. Because we know that the headset is going to amplify it. Like I said, you get 50% faster results with the headset.
And then how many, I know you said the optimum is 3 times a day, but if people don't have that kind of time, I mean, is it 10 or 15 minutes 3 times a day, or an hour 3 times a day?
No, it's 10 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and you really in the morning and in the nighttime it doesn't take any time because you could set your alarm 10 minutes earlier,
That's
and you
true.
can just put it to sleep and go to sleep.
That's
It's
true.
the sleep ones are about 20 minutes too, but it doesn't take any time. You just do it right
Okay.
before bed.
Well, then this is
So
really minimal. I mean,
yeah,
as far as the time, if you can't take an hour out of your day
right.
to do something that's this important, particularly if you have issues. If you just feel like you're all really strong, you don't need it. But this is still it's like exercise.
Well, we have peak performance people like Tom Brady use it,
Yeah.
and everybody knows he's got a really powerful brain.
Right.
So, and you don't have to do it every day if you don't need it. You can do it as long as you do it every 72 hours because the
Yeah.
nervous system resets every 72 hours. But
Okay.
in the beginning, we recommend people listen to it 3 times a day just to learn the different brainwave patterns, and that's why we call it brain fitness. There's different fitness ideas in what we're talking about with the brain. In the morning, you
Okay.
need a different brainwave training than you need in the evening.
Right. So, okay, so I want to just say again, second time around, thank you so much for your dynamism and your just truly, let's just sum it all up. It's incredible knowledge and experience that you've gained over since 1986, and the fact that you started it out of adversity is a very good lesson for what we've been talking about, right?
Yes.
Like you said, thank you to my father for being an alcoholic, but also the Silva method and just your father being transformed. I mean,
Yes.
he's a great example of what we've been talking about, and
Yes.
that it can work. So, well,
Yeah.
Patrick, I'll see you in Vegas, and
Yes.
I'll come over to the booth and do my annual session
Okay.
at BrainTap if I can get in. It's always the most crowded booth in the entire show, and
Yeah.
you really do have to
People
get
love
there
it there.
early
Yeah.
to get on the list, right?
Yeah. We'll do another neuro check with you and see how your nervous system's doing.
I love it. Okay, and you know that you and I are very good friends with Rob Fletcher.
Yeah.
He's our mutual friend, and that Rob's going to have some big announcements that you and I are going to be connected to with Dr. Goldman. So we have lots to share going forward as well. So, all right. Well, thank you again, and we will continue.